In a lively bar in Macau, there was this Korean girl named Jdrama. She was working there as a waitress, which might sound surprising because she had actually graduated from university. But the thing was, she had a bit of a tough situation. Her so-called friend had swiped her credit card, and that left her in a big pile of debt. So there she was, stuck in the waitress gig. One evening, while she was doing her usual waitress thing, her co-worker dropped a job ad in front of her. It was about being a nanny for some rich old guy. Jdrama wasn't really keen on the idea, but she needed money desperately to clear her debts. The old man, Kim Suk-gu, promised a fat paycheck for anyone who was willing to be his nanny. But here's the twist. This old man was the big boss of a gambling company that owned a bunch of casinos in Macau. A few days later, Jdrama went to a fancy hotel for a job interview. There she met a guy named Kim Sung-yeol, who happened to be the illegitimate son of Kim Suk-gu. They had a chat about how the nanny job worked, and Jdrama spilled the beans about her debt situation, admitting that she was all in for the money. At the end of the talk, Sung-yeol asked her to meet up again at 7 to talk more about the job. So when night rolled around, they met up at a restaurant. But what was supposed to be a straightforward business chat took a wild turn. It turns out that Sung-yeol wanted Jdrama to become Suk-gu's wife, so they could get their hands on his fortune. You see, Sung-yeol couldn't inherit the cash himself because he was the illegitimate child. So, if this plan worked, he wanted Jdrama to split the money with him. Well, Jdrama thought this plan was absolutely bonkers and said a big fat no. And with that, she got up and left the restaurant. But not too long after that, Jdrama started having second thoughts. I mean, who wouldn't? She really needed the money, and Sung-yeol was offering her a way out. So in the end, she gave in and agreed to go along with Sung-yeol's crazy plan. The very next day, Sung-yeol took Jdrama to a fancy beauty salon where she got her hair cut short. He also bought her some new clothes. I have to say, she did look more attractive and elegant after the makeover. But Sung-yeol had another motive. He wanted Jdrama to look like Suk-gu's late wife, who sadly passed away in an accident. That accident not only took her life, but also left Suk-gu paralyzed. With her new appearance, Jdrama began her mission to win Suk-gu's heart while working as his nanny. She had only a month to do it because they were taking a yacht from Macau to Busan. When they arrived at the yacht, Suk-gu's servants and crew welcomed Jdrama, and let me tell you, none of them were too impressed by her looks. But there was one person who didn't seem too bothered, Suk-gu himself. He got a bit grumpy and complained that Jdrama was late. But she stood her ground and told him to be polite. That surprised Suk-gu a bit, seeing how she didn't just take his scolding lying down. Once she was free from Suk-gu's nagging, one of the maids named Yumai invited Jdrama to tour the ship and meet the other maids. Yumai was really friendly and even encouraged her to stick around as Suk-gu's nanny. Later, Jdrama lay in her new room, daydreaming about how she might actually get her hands on Suk-gu's fortune if everything went according to her and Sung-yeol's plan. A few hours later, Jdrama decided to head to the back of the yacht and enjoy the beautiful sunset. It turns out Sung-yeol had the same idea, and they started chatting about Suk-gu. Jdrama was curious about Suk-gu's gloomy demeanor, thinking he really despised life. Suk-gu didn't deny it. He said he hated not only life but also women because he believed they were all the same, just after his money. The next day, when Jdrama was checking Suk-gu's blood pressure, he asked her for a key that she had tucked away. But she knew that the key unlocked the drawer with the cigarettes, so she refused to hand it over, which made him pretty angry. He even offered her money and a diamond necklace in exchange for the key, but she stayed firm and said no. This was the first time Suk-gu had encountered someone who had the guts to defy his commands, and he really didn't like it. He got so mad that he told Jdrama to get out of his room. But as she was just a few inches away from the door, he suddenly threw a plate at it, scaring the daylights out of her. Terrified, she left his room and found Sung-yeol. She was worried that Suk-gu would fire her, but Sung-yeol reassured her, saying that the game had just begun. Days went by and Jdrama played the nanny role like a pro. Surprisingly, even though Suk-gu was still pretty arrogant, he started to warm up to Jdrama. He'd found a nanny who suited his taste, someone persistent and picky, just like his late wife. Jdrama even got him back into playing the piano, a hobby he'd abandoned since his family's accident. But here's the twist. Jdrama wasn't falling for Suk-gu. Nope, she was secretly developing feelings for Sung-yeol. I mean, they did spend a lot of time together when they had free moments. One night, when she needed someone to talk to, she sought out Sung-yeol, and they had a quiet chat in a corner of the ship. Of course, anyone who spotted them talking got suspicious, One of Subku's servants, Khan, eavesdropped on their conversation. Then, a few days later, while Subku was fishing, he hooked a giant fish that pulled him towards the ship's edge. Jae-in panicked and told Chan to cut Subku's fishing line to save him. But instead of being grateful, Subku unleashed his anger on Chan. As a punishment, Subku gave Chan two choices: either jump into the sea and grab the fish or eat the meat he'd thrown on the floor. Chan went with the second option. Nobody dared to intervene except Jae-in. But Subku saw her actions as defiance, so he kicked her off the yacht, even throwing plates of food at her, which messed up her clothes. Jae-in finally left the yacht and stayed in a motel. However, that night, Sung-yeol came to her room and tried to convince her to go back to the yacht. He even hinted that they might find someone else to replace her if she kept refusing due to Subku's behavior. Meanwhile, Subku was looking at an old photo album with the ship's captain. The captain remarked that Jae-in was quite similar to Subku's late wife, especially in her dislike for Subku's harsh treatment of his subordinates. Unexpectedly, the next day, Subku approached Jae-in, not just to invite her back, but also to propose to her. Without much hesitation, Jae-in accepted his proposal. On the wedding night, which happened on the yacht, Subku told Jae-in a Cinderella story. He felt that she shared some similarities with Cinderella, so he nicknamed her Cinderella. However, Jae-in wasn't too impressed with the name because after the party, she reunited with Sung-yeol at the back of the yacht, where they spent some quality time together. The next day, to her shock, Jae-in discovers Subku's lifeless body in bed with his eyes wide open. She freaks out and quickly covers his face with a blanket. Her first instinct is to call Sung-yeol, who rushes to the room. Seeing his father's lifeless form, Sung-yeol explains that they'll need a death certificate from Bizen, where Subku lived, to claim the inheritance. Jae-in is still quite worried though. After all, they don't know who might have caused Subku's death. She's even thinking of going to the police, but Sung-yeol advises against it. Acting recklessly isn't the way to go. Instead, he suggests they act normal and cover up Subku's death until they reach Bizen. So they dress Subku in a way that makes it seem like he's still alive. But Subku's employees aren't fools. They start suspecting something is off with their boss, and even the Kim family driver gets suspicious. But Jae-in does her best to act like everything's okay. She tells everyone that Subku is staying quiet and dressed oddly because he's got a cold and needs some rest. She makes sure nobody disturbs or touches him. When they finally arrive at the Kim family home in Bizen, Sung-yeol instructs Jae-in to feed Subku through a tube, so they can control the timing of his death. Even though she's filled with panic and fear, she follows his orders. However, their actions don't go unnoticed, and Subku's loyal secretary, Dae-jin, becomes suspicious. She secretly reports her concerns to the police. A bit later, Sung-yeol tells Jae-in that he's going to send his trusted notary to get a death certificate made. But before the notary could show up, the police who Dae-jin had called arrived first. And the reason for showing up was to arrest Jae-in, accusing her of murdering Subku. In the police station's interrogation room, they point to a hose as evidence that she tried to hide Subku's death. Feeling trapped, Jae-in asks them to call Sung-yeol because he could explain what really happened. So they bring Sung-yeol in, but to her shock, he betrays her. Right in front of the police, he accuses Jae-in of being a cold-blooded killer who took his father's life. This betrayal leaves her so stunned that she faints. When Jae-in comes to, she finds Sung-yeol by her side, acting like nothing had happened. She's furious and demands to know why he lied like that. With a sinister grin, Sung-yeol admits that he killed Subku. It's true. If Subku dies, his inheritance goes to his wife. However, if his wife is deemed ineligible, then Sung-yeol gets the inheritance. He had planned this all along, and Jae-in was just a tool to help him achieve his grand scheme. Jae-in is not only shocked by Sung-yeol's confession, but also deeply disappointed because the man she loved ended up betraying her. As if things couldn't get any worse, Sung-yeol hands over a voice recording to the police. It's Jae-in, cursing at Subku, when she was kicked off the yacht for standing up for Kan. But Jae-in doesn't give up. She's thinking about Kan and the people around Subku. So she asks the police to meet Dae-jin. When they finally meet, Jae-in begs Dae-jin to let her attend Subku's funeral. You might expect Dae-jin to refuse, but there's a twist. Jae-in shares Subku's version of the Cinderella story, something he only tells people he trusts. This gets Dae-jin's attention, and she immediately calls a lawyer to release Jae-in so she can attend the funeral. Later on, Jae-in tries to find Kan, believing he knows something. But during her search, she encounters Yumai, who's holding Fusei, Sukgu's dog. Surprisingly, there's a hidden camera on the ribbon around Fusei's neck, allowing Sukgu to keep an eye on what's happening on the yacht. But Jaiyan remains unaware of the hidden camera. Yumei gives Jaiyan a gift that contains Sukgu's tablet. However, Jaiyan is so focused on finding Khan that she ignores the tablet. A few moments later, the police arrest her again, thinking she might be trying to escape their surveillance. Meanwhile, a police officer delivers the package containing the tablets. Khan meets with Sumyeol to spill the beans about the secret camera hidden on Fusei's ribbon. Khan thinks that this camera might have evidence that could expose the truth about Sukgu's murder. You see, on the night of the murder, Fusei was in the room with Sukgu, and the camera might have recorded how Sumyeol killed him. But because Khan knew about the camera, he couldn't be allowed to live. So on the very day he told Sumyeol about the secret camera, he was found dead. The one who did it, no surprise here, was Sumyeol. Afterward, Sumyeol calls Yumai to arrange to pick up Fusei. She innocently agrees to meet him on the ship. Meanwhile, inside the car carrying Jaiyan, the police open Sukgu's tablet and find photos of Jaiyan. It dawns on her that the hidden camera was on Fusei's ribbon, and she worries that Yumei might be in danger. Without wasting a moment, she tries to grab the police cell phone and makes a run for it. After escaping, Jaiyan calls Yumai to check on her whereabouts. When Jaiyan calls Yumai, she's already on the boat with her boyfriend. Jaiyan tries to explain that Fusei holds the key to exposing all of Sumyeol's crimes, but she's too late. Sumyeol shows up in front of Yumai and even hits her boyfriend, who doesn't really know what's going on. Poor Yumai is left alone, unable to do much except getting hit on the head until she passes out. Meanwhile, Fusei manages to escape from Sumyeol. While Sumyeol is busy searching for Fusei, Jaiyan seizes the opportunity. She sneaks up behind him and gives him a good whack on the head with a golf club. Then she grabs Fusei and hides with the dog. After a game of hide-and-seek, Sumyeol finally tracks down Fusei. But here's the twist. Jaiyan had already taken the ribbon from the dog's head and made a run for it. Sumyeol chases after her and catches her easily. Jaiyan is no match for him, and he could have easily thrown her to the ground and strangled her, making her struggle for breath. Luckily, in this critical moment, Yumai comes to her senses. She grabs a fire extinguisher and smashes it into Sumyeol's head. With just one blow, he passes out cold. In the end, they manage to obtain the footage of Sukgu's murder. Jaiyan is cleared of all charges, and she regains her right to inherit Sukgu's property. On the flip side, Sumyeol finds himself locked up in prison. However, in the closing scenes of the movie, Jaiyan pays him a visit in prison because she's still haunted by two burning questions. First off, she's really curious about why he had to go to the extreme of killing Sukgu, especially when she genuinely wanted to help him with his plan. It turns out that Sumyeol's motivation was revenge. A long time ago, Sukgu abandoned his dying mother. Then comes the second question. Did Sumyeol have any feelings for her at all during this whole ordeal? Sumyeol bluntly admits that he never loved her, and he never believed that Jaiyan had fallen for him. But he did call her Cinderella. Upon hearing this, Jaiyan simply smiles and walks away. So the moral of the story is sometimes, even if you think you're the Cinderella in someone's life, make sure they're not planning to turn you into the wicked stepmother before you say I do.